Mr. Speaker, he's talking about the biggest sustained increase. Talking about an increase is not the same as giving an increase.
Prime Minister, it's Prime Minister's questions. We've got to concentrate. Kemi Badenoch.
Just answer the question.
The military and the defence industry want to hear about what he's going to do, not him prosecuting past governments. He promised the Defence Investment Plan would be published. He promised that the Defence Investment Plan would be published last autumn.
Keir Starmer just got called out in brutal fashion as the Speaker stepped in and shut down the chaos while he kept dodging Kemi Badenoch's heavy questions. What should have been a routine session turned into a tense, uncomfortable showdown. With pressure mounting every second, he avoided a straight answer. And by the end of it, it didn't look like leadership. It looked like evasion under fire.
This is so poor from the Prime Minister. This is, Labour MPs are laughing. Labour MPs are laughing, Mr. Speaker.
Things got out of control fast, and I'm not exaggerating. You could hear MPs shouting over each other, constant interruptions, and the Speaker clearly losing patience. At one point, it felt like a warning. The tone shifted to just answer the question. And honestly, that's when I realized this wasn't normal PMQs. This was pressure building in real time, and all of that pressure was landing on the Prime Minister.
My responsibility is to keep the British people safe, and that is a duty I take seriously.
I kept noticing the same thing again and again. He was being asked very direct questions, but the answers didn't quite match. Not that he wasn't speaking. He was, confidently, at length. But if you listen closely, the core question kept slipping through. And that's what made it frustrating to watch, because you're waiting for that one clear answer, and it just doesn't come.
It is being reported that the Treasury is asking the MOD to make £3.5 billion worth of cuts this year. He won't fund our military because he wants to fund more welfare. That's why he has a welfare plan to 2031, but no defence investment plan at all.
Now, this would already be tense on a normal day, but it's not a normal day. There's a serious situation in the background, the Middle East conflict, and you can't ignore how that changes everything. This isn't just political back and forth. This affects real people. Rising costs, uncertainty, pressure on families, it's all connected. So when I see leaders not being crystal clear in a moment like this, it hits differently. Starmer tried to come across as the calm, careful leader, the one who didn't want to rush into a war without thinking it through. And I get that. Nobody wants reckless decisions when lives are at stake. But here's where I started questioning things. Being cautious is fine, but you still need to show you're ready. And that's where it didn't feel convincing.
The Prime Minister was right to resist us being drawn into an ill-conceived war in the Middle East with apparently no clear plan for how it may end. And despite the welcome cost of living support he referenced in his statement on Monday, we are all rightly angry that our constituents will feel the impact of this war in their pockets and in their daily lives.
Because the opposition wasn't just asking about war. They were asking something much simpler. Are we prepared? If things escalate tomorrow, what's the plan? What's already in place?
We're proud to be investing a record £9 billion to deliver quality homes that they deserve. We're turning around army recruitment after the party opposite missed targets for 14 years.
And instead of a straight answer, I kept hearing the same fallback. Money. Big numbers. He kept repeating it. $270 billion on defense over this parliament. And sure, that sounds huge. It's meant to reassure people like me, like you, like anyone watching. Then he added the percentages. Defense spending going from 2.3% to 2.6%, aiming for 3.5% under NATO. Again, on paper, it sounds solid.
Are the decisions we take on military actions. My principles are clear. That's a sharp contrast to the leader of the opposition, who wanted to jump into the war with both feet without thinking through the consequences.
But I couldn't ignore the gap, because while he was talking about how much money is being committed, nobody was really hearing how that money is being used right now, and that's the part that matters most. The real question was about the defense investment plan, the actual roadmap, the detailed breakdown of where the money goes, what gets upgraded, and when. And here's the problem. It's not out yet. It was supposed to be published months ago. We're already in mid-April and it's still not there.
Last February, that was 7 months after taking office, I took the decision to increase defence spending from 2.3 to 2.6%, paid for by a difficult decision on overseas aid. Last June, at the NATO summit, I committed to raising core defence spending to 3.5%.
I noticed a pattern. Strong statements, long-term promises, but when it came to immediate clarity, things slowed down. And in a setting like that, where every second matters, you can't hide that. People notice it instantly. Even the constant references to past governments didn't sit right with me in that moment. Yes, mistakes were made before. Yes, there were cuts. But that's not what was being asked. The focus was on now. What's being done right now to make sure the country is ready?
Can he outline what steps he is taking both to support our armed forces and to plan for all future contingencies?
That's why the speaker stepping in felt important. It wasn't just about controlling noise. It felt like someone trying to pull the conversation back to reality, back to the actual question that still hadn't been answered.
The budget committed record funding to defence. I reaffirm those commitments now. The Strategic Defence Review is a 10-year blueprint for national security. The Defence Investment Plan will put that into effect. It will be published as soon as possible.
And the issue itself is serious. We're talking about military readiness, defense capability, national security. This isn't something you can afford to be vague about.
We need to get it right. We inherited plans that were uncosted and undeliverable, and we're not going to repeat those mistakes.
When I watch something like this, I'm not just listening for big numbers or strong language. I'm looking for clarity. I want to know what decisions are being made today, not just what might happen years down the line, but what I saw instead felt like hesitation. Starmer kept going back to that $270 billion figure, calling it a record investment. He talked about long-term strategies, future commitments, all of that. But without the actual plan in front of us, it felt incomplete. Because there's no way to see how any of it is actually being executed. And that's where the frustration builds.
Mr. Speaker, he says he doesn't agree with Lord Robertson. Lord Robertson is a former Labour Defence Secretary, a former NATO Secretary General. He also said, and I quote, "We are underprepared, we are underinsured, we are under attack."
And then Kemi Badenoch stepped in, and I could immediately feel the shift. Up until that point, it felt like a lot of talking, but the moment she started, it turned into something else entirely. This wasn't a speech anymore. This was an interrogation.
We're fixing it. What did they do? They voted against it. They voted to keep the broken system. So taking advice from the party opposite on reforming welfare and defence spending is like asking Liz Truss how to keep your mortgage down.
I noticed how direct she was. No long build-up, no soft tone, just straight to the point. She basically dragged the conversation from vague promises into accountability. And the way she did it? Smart. She didn't just rely on her own criticism. She brought in Lord Robertson. That's not a random name. Former Defense Secretary, former NATO Secretary General. When someone like that says the government has corrosive complacency and that Britain is underprepared, you can't just shrug it off. And she knew that. She used those words like pressure points. Every time she spoke, she kept pulling it back to one simple question. Where is the plan? That's it.
And what are they doing? They're promoting sex toys in Parliament. That's what they're doing. Mr. Speaker, it gives a whole new meaning to fiddling while Rome burns. Mr. Speaker, it has been... That's what they're doing, Mr. Speaker. Let's get back to the issue of the Defence Investment Plan and defence spending.
I could see what she was doing. She kept repeating it in different ways, tightening the grip each time, because the more she repeated it, the harder it became to dodge. And honestly, it started working. The gap between the question and the answer became obvious. But here's the thing I kept noticing. Every time she tried to lock him into a yes or no answer, he pivoted. Smoothly, I'll admit. He'd shift to spending figures, talk about long-term strategies, bring up past governments, but never fully land on the actual question. And after a few rounds of that, even I was thinking, this isn't what she asked. That's when the speaker stepped in. And for me, that was a big moment.
I don't think it looks good, shouting somebody down at the dispatch box.
You could hear the frustration. It wasn't just about noise anymore. It felt like the speaker was trying to pull things back on track. Like saying, this is getting out of hand. Focus. Because at that point, it wasn't a clean debate anymore. It was interruptions, shouting, and answers that weren't really answers. And when the speaker has to intervene like that, it tells you something. It tells you the debate isn't flowing, it's slipping. And whether intentional or not, it started to look like Starmer was avoiding direct engagement.
Waiting for this government to fund the Strategic Defence Review.
Then Badenoch took it a step further, and this is where things really escalated. She changed the argument completely. Now it wasn't just about delays or missing plans. She brought in welfare spending and connected it directly to defense. And I'm not going to lie, that was a sharp move. Because suddenly, this wasn't just a technical issue anymore. It became a question of priorities.
There are still 2 weeks of the parliamentary session left. So why wouldn't the Prime Minister publish the Defence Investment Plan before then?
She basically framed it like this. While defense planning is delayed, welfare spending keeps growing. And then she dropped that line from Lord Robertson. You can't defend Britain with an ever-expanding welfare budget. That stuck with me, because now I'm not just thinking about plans anymore. I'm thinking about trade-offs. Where is the money going? What matters more right now? Long-term security or current spending?
Mr. Speaker, I remind the House that we put in place the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the Cold War. Mr. Speaker, let me spell that out. That means we're spending £270 billion over this Parliament. That's £5 billion more this year, with defence funding increasing every year. These are record amounts, Mr. Speaker. Decisions of a Labour Prime Minister, a Labour Chancellor and a Labour government.
Of course, Starmer pushed back. He flipped it immediately and started talking about past Conservative failures, welfare spending rising under them, missed reforms, voting against changes. It all came out, and just like that, the debate shifted again.
And what a contrast. When they came into office, defence spending was 2.5%. When they left, it was 2.3%.
Now it wasn't defense versus welfare anymore. It was blame versus blame. And honestly, that's where it started getting messy for me.
When they came into office, the army was 100,000. When they left office, 72,000. They cut frigates and destroyers by 25%. They cut mine hunters by 50%.
Because at this point, it's not even a debate anymore. It's a mystery. Badenoch keeps bringing it up, and honestly, I get why. There are only a few weeks left in the parliamentary session, and still no defense investment plan. On top of that, there's talk about the Treasury pushing for $3.5 billion in cuts. So now I'm sitting there thinking, wait, there's a full welfare plan running all the way to 2031, but nothing concrete for defense right now? That doesn't look like a delay anymore. That starts to look like confusion, or worse, disagreement behind the scenes.
She said at the weekend, our defence is the weakest for 400 years. That is what they left behind.
Mr. Speaker, he's talking about the biggest sustained increase. Talking about an increase is not the same as giving an increase. The military and the defence industry want to hear about what he's going to do, not him prosecuting past governments. He promised the Defence Investment Plan would be published last autumn.
And then she hits another nerve: military readiness. She straight up says the armed forces are at the end of their tether. That's not light language. That's serious. And when she brings up things like the HMS Dragon upgrade being paused, it suddenly becomes real. This isn't abstract policy anymore. This is equipment, capability, actual defense systems being delayed while politicians argue. But instead of locking into that, Starmer goes back to the same move, pointing at the past, talking about how previous governments shrank the army from 100,000 to 72,000, cut ships, weakened the military. And maybe that's true, but I keep thinking, okay, but what's happening right now? Right at the end, she tries one last push. This chaos money angle, basically forcing a simple choice. If there's money saved, does it go to defense or more welfare? Simple question, right? But again, no clear answer. And that's what stuck with me, because zoom out for a second. This isn't just political drama. There's war risk, economic pressure, real defense gaps being talked about.